Hey, the PMP exam is one of the most difficult tests for professionals, and we've heard this from everyone. But not to worry, you have a coach who eats the PMBOK for lunch. Here he is to set the record straight for you, your friend Phil.
Funding limit reconciliation is a request that came in from a student seeking to know more about Chapter 7. So what I want to do for you today is just go through funding limit reconciliation really quick and go through the PMBOK guide and show you a practical illustration of what this is about. Now, first of all, be aware that if you do a search for funding limit reconciliation, it's pretty much just going to pull up PMP related stuff, which should be an illustration to us how the PMI comes up with terms, tools, and techniques that are peculiar to them. And that's okay. But I just don't want you freaking out when you go searching and you don't find anything other than PMI's perspective. Now, funding limit reconciliation. Think about those three words. Funding limit. There is a limit to how much you can be funded. Think about it. Why would there be a limit to how much you can be funded? Not only across the entire project, but let's talk about how much you can be funded periodically. Think about it. If you are on a project and you expect to receive, let's say, $5,000 every month, but management says, hey, wait a minute, there's a funding limit around here in this company, in this entity, in this whatever it is, you cannot be funded like that. Now, I have found this to be the case when working with certain government entities. There's a funding limit. If you're working the project for them and it's a cost reimbursable type contract and you have an amount that is above their funding limit, they're going to have issues and there's going to be pushback. You need to reconcile the funding limit with what you are thinking they should fund you for that time period. You get what I'm saying? So let's read from the PMBOK guide, and this will shed some more light on it. It says in the PMBOK guide on page 253, the expenditure of funds should be reconciled with any funding limits on the commitment of funds for the project. Let's break that down one more time. The expenditure of funds, how much you are going to spend, how much you are planning to spend, should be reconciled with funding limits. Now, how do we know it's what you are planning to spend? Because this is in planning. This is determined budget. Okay? So the expenditure of funds should be reconciled with any funding limits on the commitment of funds before funds are committed to the project. You get it? You need to reconcile. It says a variance between funding limits and the planned expenditures. That's where it lies. Funding limits, planned expenditures. We want to spend this, but there's a funding limit that's this. Too high. There's a gap. It needs to be reconciled. That's really what they're saying. So it says, a variance between funding limits and planned expenditures will sometimes necessitate the rescheduling of work. In other words, if you're planning to spend so much at a particular time period, you may need to spend less and spread it out. I'll show you an example of this in just a minute. But it says, a variance between funding limits and the planned expenditure will sometimes necessitate the rescheduling of work to level out the rate of expenditures. This is accomplished by placing imposed date constraints for work into the project schedule. It's as simple as that. So I'm going to show you an illustration here of how funding limit reconciliation works. Now, imagine on a project, a project manager, comes up with a budget, and the budget is $12,000. And let's say it's $12,000 for 12 months. What are you thinking about right now? How much each month, right? So assuming your management and the project manager comes to you and shows you this breakdown. a breakdown that looks like this. Remember, you've got $12,000 total for 1 year in your head. But what if they came to you and showed you this? What do you see? Well, you see a difference in how the budget has been broken down. You were expecting to see maybe $1,000 a month, but instead, when you take a look, what you're seeing is month one, $5,000. Month two, $2,000. These are outside of what management may tell you is their funding limit. So think about it like this. If management said, this is our funding limit, $1,000 every month, you cannot spend more than $1,000 a month. If they said that to you, you're the project manager, it means you need to reschedule the work. So work that you had planned over here, and I'll just type in the word plan, and this is the limit. Remember, it's planned expenditures. So this is the funding limit right here. The funding limit is $1,000, and your planned expenditure you can see how the planned expenditure is broken down. So let's wrap this. Planned expenditure funding limit. What PMI is saying is, if at the end of determined budget you have a scenario, a situation where there is a variance between the planned expenditure and the funding limit, this $4,000, you got an issue here, right? You're going to have to reschedule this somehow. This 4,000 and that 1,000, those reds, there's a problem. Everything else, no problem. Zero variance there, right on the money. But these are positives. So if you take a look at the addition of all of those positives, the sum, we've got 5,000, and here we've got 5,000. We could move these monies around. So we can take 500 from here and add it to this. We could take 600 from here, add it until we max that out, and the same for the other 1,000. So the summary is, this right here is the reconciliation. I just call it recon amount. This is the amount you need to reconcile right here. Okay? 4,000 and 1,000. How will you do that? As PMI tell you, it's by rescheduling the work. Now, someone might say, but this is equipment, machinery that we need for the project. This is an upfront expense. What do we do? Well, you know what to do. You're going to have to reschedule. Possibly you start your project early. You go a few months back. And take some of these monies, right? Like these. And put the monies in here, right here. In other words, reschedule. Let's just put in the values. There you go. So reschedule those monies either in advance, or you could schedule them in the future. In other words, whatever you need to do to reconcile the funding so that the limit is not hit, then go ahead and do that. And that is what we mean by funding limit reconciliation. Again, it's a term that is peculiar to the PMBOK guide. You do not find this in other literature that is not PMI associated. Now, it might have other terms, that we use in the real world. In fact, when we did this in an environmental engineering company I worked for, we didn't have a name for it. We just knew there was a limit, and we needed to reschedule the work, or we needed to address it. It was a funding limit, and we needed to address it. They had a limit of certain millions of dollars that you could not spend in any 1 month. And as a result of that, we had to reconcile funding limits. As simple as that. So whatever you want to call it in the real world, that's fine. But PMI called it funding limit reconciliation. Now, I'll go a step further to say there are a lot of terms in the PMBOK guide. A lot of terms. And honestly, to me, these terms are not rocket science. They're not far out. There are a few terms that may be a little bit further out than others, but for the most part, if you go to page 686 and you go through to page 694 and beyond, maybe even read the glossary, the index, if there is a term that you're stumped on, it could be that I've got a video on it, so you want to search on YouTube for whatever that term is and the word Praizion. For example, you could search for earned value Praizion. Just put the name of this channel, Praizion, in there. And if you come across a video or videos, watch them. And they will explain to you what exactly that thing is. Or put in a process name, Monitor Communications, Praizion. You'll find videos. But if there's a term or tool and technique that throws you for a loop, I encourage you to put a comment below. Let me know which one it is. But first of all, do your search on YouTube. That term, that thing, that tool and technique, and Praizion, and see if anything comes up on it. The same way this student typed in a comment, typed in a request, and I saw it and created this video, the same way I'll find yours at some point. Create you a video if I don't have one already. Chances are I probably already have one somewhere. All right, I hope this was of help to you, and I wish you all the best in your prep. Some of you have been asking the question, Phil, when are we going to have another session, another live training session? Hold on, I'm just getting done with one. The trainer needs a rest. Trainer needs a rest. So when I get done with this round, I'm going to recharge my batteries, and I will make an announcement at the right time. All right, thank you very much for joining me. I wish you all the best in your prep. Those of you taking the exam at home, make sure you do the due diligence. Do a mock-up run, test all your systems, make sure your neighbors are not pulling on the internet so hard that you're unable to take the exam, as has happened to some students. Do all the due diligence, and I look forward to hearing the good news. Take care. Bye for now.